Hey kids, this is Ivan. How you doing? I had an interesting thing occur to me the other day due to an experience I just had where I made more than one character for a game and then I got to play both of those characters. And after, making those characters and playing them, seeing how they got played and, experiencing the internal experience of trying to think like and thinking like and being them, it occurred to me that both of them are kind of semi-autobiographical, that they're about different facets of my own personality. Maybe autobiographical isn't the right word, but the idea, they certainly, I could identify with what those characters did, how they thought, with parts of me. And I started to think about that, and then I realized, like, with all the characters I've played recently, if you put together Volkrothrum and Ingolf, and, Ingolf's, just kind of, not timidity, but just kind of feeling shy, a little bit of shame, somebody that's a little bit hesitant, even though he gets angry, he's a little bit hesitant to act upon that. Somebody like Volkrothrum, who is kind of haughty and full of himself and a know-it-all, and is much more decisive, and doesn't necessarily look down on other people, but he knows, he knows how to manipulate them, and he knows he's smarter than a lot of other people. You put them together with somebody like Agent Carlson, like I'm playing in Delta Green, who's kind of a bit of a wise ass and flippant, but still tries to be polite. You put him together with somebody like Philippe, who desperately, in All for One, who desperately wants to matter. Somebody who really doesn't, even though he's good at what he does, he still doesn't feel like he really entirely belongs. And so he's always trying to prove himself. And likewise, he, the more awful stuff they come face to face with, the more grim and sullen he gets, and the more he feels like he might be out of his element, but he desperately wants to do the right thing at the same time. You look at Tess in The Veil, and how certain parts of her where she just didn't quite understand other people. There was something about human behavior that was quite a mystery to her. Brother Zed in my BX game, who is kind of, he takes charge, and once again he's a guy that's a bit flippant, but certainly very decisive, and rallies the other guys. He's kind of a not exactly a cheerleader, but maybe close. He's somebody that just like, let's quit screwing around, let's go this way. Look, Zachary Bishop in our Mithras game. This character is kind of like almost a bit of he's kind of an absent-minded professor version of Indiana Jones. He's not quite as cool as Indiana Jones, and he can get very sidetracked and very into what he's doing, but still at the same time has a bit of a, once again, a bit of a wise ass, and he has a bit of a dark side to him as well. You take all these characters that I've been playing, and you put them all together, you might get a pretty good picture of me at the end of the day. And it's funny. It's something that I don't know that I consciously choose to exaggerate certain parts of myself. I don't think so. However, if you look at these characters objectively, you start to see that happen. Certainly not all of each character is all me, and you can't point to any one of those characters and say, well, that's Ivan. But certainly there's parts of those characters that I identify with very strongly. And once again, you put them all together, and the more characters that I've played, the more you put those together, the better picture of me you start to see, or that starts to emerge. And that, I think, is really kind of fascinating. And maybe that's our window to identification and immersion when we are identified with the character. Some kind of, as Anthony said, as I talked about this, maybe it's like a statement of identity. Like underneath it is still me, and this is me, which I thought was kind of interesting. And I can hear somewhere my friend Disembowel laughing because he says, well, immersion is impossible because you're always playing you. I don't think I'm necessarily playing me, but I'm certainly identifying with parts of that character. And I find that kind of fascinating because that's definitely not my intent, but I start to recognize parts of me. Not the whole of me, but parts of me. And here's a $65 million question that's been rattling around in my head, because the game that I had this experience in, playing these two characters, was, of course, Circle of Hands. But in that game, there's a pool of characters, and I'm not required to play characters made by other people, but it's certainly on the table, and that's something I definitely want to do. I want the full experience. I want us all to play the various characters, see how they get played. And so here's a question for me is, when taking on the mantle of a character created by somebody else, am I going to find points of identification with them? I mean, certainly they're human beings, so I'll be able to. Well, they're not really human beings; they're really just stuff on a piece of paper and an idea in our heads. But you know what I mean. We breathe life into them, so certainly I can identify with parts of that. But am I going to create new points that weren't necessarily in the character before, the way Anthony or Eloy made them? I don't know. This will be interesting. So I'm kind of really looking forward to see what happens with that. And I can certainly see there's parts of the characters that I identify with, but there's other parts of the characters they've made, and I'm not really sure. Are they really facets of their personality? Is it going to be a little bit odd putting on that other character? I'm definitely interested in that experience. So what about you? Have you had that experience as you look back at the various characters you've played, especially if they're very different? Do you start to notice that they're kind of this pastiche, and you put them all together and no, that's just not sure if that's the right word, but you know what I mean. You put them all together, and, oh, I think that's me, a collage, something, where it's representations of various parts of your personality. Has this ever happened to you? Take it easy, kids.